Astrid Valdez's silver Lexus pulled up in front of the Ellington mansion at precisely 1900. The detective adjusted her emerald cocktail dress, an unusual outfit for her, and took a deep breath. A charity event in support of the city hospital had brought together all the color of Seattle. Professional curiosity compelled her to accept the invitation. Inside the mansion, live music played, waiters served champagne, and the city's elite made small talk. Astrid immediately noticed Torrance Ellington, a tall man with noble gray hair on his temples and a shrewd look in his blue eyes. The renowned neurosurgeon held himself with that cold confidence that comes from people who are used to making life-and-death decisions. "Detective Valdez," Torrance shook her hand. "I'm glad you could join us." "Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Ellington. It's been an impressive evening. May I introduce my wife, Veronica?" Veronica Ellington approached them with the graceful gait of her modeling career. She looked striking in her 41 years perfect figure, flawless skin, brown hair styled in soft waves. But Astrid caught something elusive in her gray eyes. Longing, fatigue, carefully concealed anxiety. "I've heard a lot about you, Detective. Your investigations are impressive." Veronica's voice sounded melodic, but Astrid noticed her furtively glancing across the room. Following the direction, the detective saw a young couple, a girl with a violin in her hands and a tall young man with olive skin and expressive facial features. "My daughter Octavia," Torrance said, noticing Astrid's interest. "And her boyfriend Ty Novak." There was a subtle irritation in the way he said the word boyfriend. Octavia Ellington had inherited her mother's beauty, but she had a youthful energy and openness about her. She finished playing, and bowing to the audience, walked up to her parents under the arm of Ty. "You're gorgeous, darling." Veronica hugged her daughter, and Astrid noticed how Veronica and Ty's eyes met for a split second, a strangely intimate look for almost strangers. "Mom always exaggerates," Octavia smiled, but it was obvious she was pleased with the praise. "I'd like you to meet Ty, my most loyal listener and critic. And admirer," the young man added with a slight accent. His dark eyes lingered on Veronica for a moment longer than propriety demanded. Veronica remembered their first meeting as clearly as if it had happened yesterday, not 3 months ago. An art gallery in the center of the city, a contemporary art exhibition she had come alone. Torrance was busy at the hospital as usual. A strange painting caught her eye, a riot of colors that suggested some kind of primal passion. "It's called Forbidden Desire," said a voice beside her. The artist was trying to convey the state of a man seized by a feeling that could not be expressed in words. Veronica turned around and looked at the young man whose eyes seemed to see right through her. "You know about modern art," she said, trying to hide her sudden excitement. "I study human nature," he held out his hand. "Ty Novak, anthropology graduate student. Veronica Ellington." Their fingers touched, and Veronica felt an incomprehensible thrill. They spent 2 hours in the gallery, moving from painting to painting. Veronica couldn't remember the last time someone had listened so enthusiastically to her opinions, argued, discovered new points of view. It wasn't until they exchanged numbers, to discuss art, as they both pretended, that Ty mentioned, "I recently met a wonderful girl, Octavia. She's studying at the conservatory. Perhaps you know her?" The ground seemed to leave Veronica's feet. "Octavia Ellington?" "Yes," his eyes widened. "You're her mother." They stood in a daze, realizing that the lines of their lives had crossed in the most unfortunate way. The right thing to do would have been to say goodbye immediately, forget the phone numbers, pretend the meeting never happened. But 3 days later, Veronica received a message. "I can't stop thinking about that picture. And you." Their secret meetings began as innocent. Coffee in a small coffee shop far from the center, a chance encounter in a bookstore, a brief conversation in the park when Veronica was walking her dog. Each time they told themselves that nothing objectionable was going on. And then that meeting at the Botanical Garden happened. Torrance was at a medical conference in Boston. Octavia was away at a competition in Portland. They wandered among exotic plants, talking about travel, dreams, disappointments. "I love orchids," Veronica said, stopping at a beautiful flower. "So fragile in appearance, but actually incredibly hardy." "Like you," Ty said softly. standing so close she could feel the warmth of his body. Veronica wanted to object, to say that she wasn't strong at all, just good at pretending, that her marriage to Torrance had long ago become a partnership between two strangers, that years of being an impeccable society wife had drained her soul. Instead, she turned to him, and their lips met in a kiss. Desperate, inevitable, scalding. In the Ellingtons' home greenhouse, tucked away in the back of the mansion's garden, among the lush greenery and fragrant flowers, their first real intimacy took place. It was reckless to make love practically in her husband's house, but the risk only heightened the passion. Veronica trembled in Ty's arms, feeling revitalized after years of anabiosis. His hands on her body were both gentle and demanding, his lips exploring every inch of her skin. "I know it's wrong," she whispered between kisses. "I know I should feel guilty." "But you don't?" His breath burned her neck. "I feel alive, for the first time in years." They were lying on a soft blanket amid the damp stuffiness of the greenhouse when Ty spoke. "I'm truly in love with Octavia. She's amazing." Veronica froze. "Then what is this? What are we doing?" "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I've never experienced anything like this before. It's like an obsession." She ran her fingers over his face, studying every feature. "We have to stop. We have to. Tonight was the last time. The last time." But they both knew they were lying. "Are you at this event for work?" Octavia asked when she and Astrid were alone at the buffet table. "Kind of. It's always good to know the influential people of the city." "Did you like the music?" The girl's voice was sincere and eager to hear her opinion. "It was surprising. Did you choose Brahms?" "Yes," Octavia shone. "Few people recognize that sonata. Ty says I put my soul into it." "How long have you two been together?" "Almost 6 months. We met at an interdisciplinary seminar at the university. He's studying cultural anthropology, and I was making arguments about the influence of music on the evolution of human culture." Her eyes lit up when she talked about Ty. "You know, I never believed in love at first sight, but with him, everything just clicked into place." Astrid nodded, her eyes following Ty, who was chatting politely with Torrance, though his eyes kept searching the crowd for Veronica. "Mama adores him," Octavia continued. "They have such interesting conversations about art and philosophy. Dad was skeptical at first. He considers few people worthy, but even he admits that Ty is unusually clever." "And your parents? Are they happy together?" Astrid asked cautiously. A shadow ran across Octavia's face. "They are very different. Dad is a rationalist to the core. Mom is creative, but they've been together for 25 years and I've never seen them really fight." She was quiet for a moment. "Mom's changed lately, though. She's gotten kind of, lively. She bought new perfume, changed her hair. Dad's so busy at the clinic, I don't think he noticed. I'm glad she's lost 10 years. Astrid intercepted another exchange of glances between Veronica and Ty across the room, and felt a prick of alarm. Veronica stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The evening was winding down, but she needed a few minutes alone to gather her thoughts. The situation was getting out of control. She had planned to end her relationship with Ty, to explain to him that their infatuation was a dangerous mistake. But every time she saw him, her resolve melted. The bathroom door opened quietly, and Ty's face was reflected in the mirror. He locked the door and approached her. "Are you out of your mind?" she whispered. "We could be seen. I can't pretend anymore." His voice was hoarse with desire. "I can't stand next to you and pretend you're just my girlfriend's mother." He hugged her from behind, and Veronica felt her resolve dissolve. His lips touched her neck. His hands slid around her waist. "We have to stop," she breathed out, closing her eyes. "For Octavia's sake." "I know." His hands never stopped caressing her. "But not tonight." A knock on the door caused them to pull away from each other. "Veronica?" Torrance's voice. "Are you in there? The guests are asking for you." "Just a minute, darling." She frantically fixed her makeup. "A slight migraine. I'll take a pill and come out." When she left the bathroom 2 minutes later, Ty stayed inside. As she stepped out into the hallway, she ran into Astrid Valdez, whose penetrating gaze seemed to see everything that had just happened. "A lovely evening, Mrs. Ellington," the detective said. You have an amazing family." Veronica sensed a warning in her words. Ty sat on the edge of the bed in his small apartment. Octavia was asleep, her delicate features serene. He gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. On his phone was an unread message from Veronica. "We can't go on like this. It will destroy us all." He knew she was right. Octavia didn't deserve this kind of betrayal. She was pure, sincere, loving. Next to her, he felt like a better person. But with Veronica, she made him lose his head. It wasn't just passion. There was an understanding between them on some deep level. Like two lost souls who had finally found each other. "I'll try to talk to her tomorrow," Ty thought as he lay down next to Octavia. "We have a decision to make." But he already knew he couldn't give up on Veronica. Neither could she give up on him. They were trapped in their own feelings, entangled in an invisible web of seduction from which there was no way out without pain and destruction. Fog enveloped the coast, turning the wooden terrace of the cottage into an island cut off from the rest of the world. Veronica stood with her arms wrapped around herself, watching the gray waves crashing against the rocks below. The October air was permeated with moisture and salt, but she didn't feel cold. There was a fire inside her that even the piercing wind couldn't extinguish. Ty's arms wrapped around her waist, his lips touching her neck. "What are you thinking?" he whispered, pulling her against him. "That I'm completely out of my mind," she turned to him. "Telling my husband that I'm going to Portland for the weekend with my friends. And here I was, with you." His eyes darkened. Regret? Instead of answering, she kissed him. Long, deep, desperate kisses. They returned to the bedroom, where the wood-burning fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls. Ty slowly undid the buttons on her blouse, kissing every inch of her exposed skin. "If this is crazy," Veronica exhaled, throwing back her head, "I don't want to go back to sanity." They made love as if it were the last time they would ever make love, with the desperation of the doomed and a passion that knew no barriers. Woven in their embrace, they forgot everything. Torrance, Octavia, the inevitable consequences. There was only the two of them, and the fire eating them from the inside out. "I love you," Ty whispered as they lay there, exhausted with passion. "It's crazy, but I really do love you." Veronica closed her eyes. Those words were simultaneously the greatest happiness and intolerable pain. "Don't say that. We both know there's no future for us." "Why not?" He raised himself on his elbow, looking into her eyes. "We could leave, start over again." She grinned bitterly. "And break my daughter's heart? Turn her life into a shambles? Become a pariah in society? Ty, you sound like a child. And you sound like a woman who is afraid to be happy." He sat down on the bed, running his hand through his hair. "Are you really happy with him? In 25 years of marriage?" "Happiness is a luxury," she answered quietly. "Sometimes you have to settle for stability." He took her face in his palms. "You deserve more than that. We both do." At the same time, in Octavia's apartment in downtown Seattle, a young girl was leaning over her laptop, looking at airfare options. "Do you think it's better to go through London or straight to Paris?" she asked the picture of Ty standing on the table. "I'm leaning toward London. Then we can visit the Royal College of Music." Her phone vibrated. A message from a friend. "How are you getting ready for your trip? Does Ty know about your plans?" Octavia smiled and replied, "Not yet. I want to surprise him. He's been wanting a European tour for a long time, and I finally got an invitation to the festival in Vienna. The perfect excuse for the two of us to travel together." She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a silver ring with a small amethyst knot, an engagement ring, but a promise. Ty had once remarked that amethyst was the stone of sincerity and loyalty. "We'll walk along the banks of the Seine," Octavia thought dreamily, "and on the Bridge of the Arts, I'll give him this ring. Not a marriage proposal, we are too young, but a promise of a future." She imagined his surprised face, the joy in his eyes, the kiss that would seal their promise. Octavia was certain. Ty was the man she wanted to spend her life with. His sensitivity, his sharp mind, his ability to see the world from an unexpected angle, all of it made him special. The ringtone of the phone interrupted her reverie. It was her father calling. "Hi, Dad. Is everything all right?" "Good evening, Octavia." Torrance's voice sounded strained. I was wondering, do you know where your mother is? Isn't she with you? She wondered. Oh, that's right. She went with Sarah and Janet to Portland this weekend. Shopping and spa, I think. The pause on the other end of the line lengthened. Daddy, is something wrong? Nothing, honey. It's just that I called Sarah about the charity committee and she mentioned she was in Vancouver with her husband. Octavia frowned. That's odd. Maybe I got mixed up? Or did Mom go with other friends? Maybe. Torrance's voice became detached. Don't worry about it. I'll see you tomorrow for family dinner. Sure. I'll bring Ty if you don't mind. Of course. His father answered after a moment's pause. He's always welcome. Torrance Ellington put down the phone and stared at the family photo on the desk in his office for a long time. The picture was taken 5 years ago. He, Veronica, and Octavia on a yacht during a vacation, all smiling, happy, and carefree. When did things start to change? When had his marriage turned into the polite coexistence of two strangers? He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Perhaps it had happened gradually, year after year, until the distance between them had become insurmountable. Torrance opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small bottle of perfume. He'd bought it for Veronica last week, hoping it would do something to revitalize their relationship. But he'd never given it to her. Every time he'd come home, she seemed so distant, so absorbed in her own thoughts. And in recent months, he'd noticed changes. New outfits she'd never shown him, different perfume, unexpected meetings with friends, strange smiles appearing on her face when she checked her phone. Torrance was a rationalist. He was used to analyzing facts, drawing conclusions based on available data. And right now, all the data pointed to one unpleasant conclusion. His wife was having an affair on the side. The only question was, with whom? Veronica and Ty returned to Seattle late Sunday night. He dropped her off 2 blocks from the house. She'd insisted on it for fear of nosy neighbors. I'll see you at lunch tomorrow. She gave him a quick kiss. Remember, we have to be careful. Especially in front of Torrance, he's gotten suspicious lately. I'll play the role of your daughter's perfect boyfriend. Ty grinned. Though it's getting harder and harder. She touched his cheek. We'll find a way, I promise. When Veronica entered the house, Torrance was waiting for her in the living room. He was sitting in a chair with a book, but she immediately realized he wasn't reading. His gaze was too intense. How was Portland? He asked, not lifting his eyes from the page. Great. She tried to sound casual. The girls and I had a great time, shopping, massages, local food. I wonder, he finally looked at her, did Sarah enjoy Portland too? Or did she enjoy Vancouver more, where she spent the weekend with her husband? Veronica felt the blood drain from her face. She opened her mouth but couldn't get a word out. You didn't even bother to coordinate the story with your friends. Torrance stood up. 25 years of marriage, Veronica. I deserve at least some sincerity. Torrance, who is he? Her husband's voice was frighteningly calm. She shook her head. It's not what you think. Really? Then enlighten me, Mrs. Ellington. Where have you been all weekend? And please don't insult my intelligence with another lie. Veronica sank into her chair, feeling the ground slipping from under her feet. She knew this moment would come, but she was completely unprepared. I needed time to think, to be alone, our marriage. Don't do this, Torrance cut her off. Don't turn your infidelity into a problem in our marriage. If you were unhappy, you should have said so. If you wanted a divorce, you should have asked for one. Instead, you chose betrayal. Every word he said was like a knife thrust. The worst part was, he was right. She had betrayed his trust, their marriage, their family. I'm sorry, Veronica whispered. I never meant to hurt you. A bitter grin contorted his normally impassive face. But you did, and not just to me. Have you thought about Octavia? How this will affect her? At the mention of her daughter, Veronica shuddered at the sudden realization that tomorrow they would all be at the same table, she, Torrance, Octavia, and Ty. The man she had spent a passionate weekend with would be sitting next to her daughter, holding her hand. In that moment, Veronica truly realized the enormity of her act. The next morning, Ty woke up in Octavia's arms. She had come to him late in the evening. The rehearsal had gone long, and she had decided to stay the night. Her long hair was strewn across the pillow. Her face seemed so serene and trusting in her sleep. Guilt hit him with renewed force. She had loved him, pure, sincere love, and he had betrayed her in the most unforgivable way. Octavia opened her eyes and smiled. "Good morning," she whispered sleepily. "Have you been awake long?" "Just now," he lied, kissing her forehead. "How did you sleep?" "I dreamt of Vienna," she stretched. "We were walking through the old city, listening to street musicians, eating strudel in a little cafe." Ty tensed. "Vienna?" "Yes." Octavia sat up on the bed, her eyes shining. "I wanted to surprise you, but I can't keep it a secret anymore. I've been invited to perform at a youth festival in Vienna this spring, and I thought, maybe we could turn it into our first trip together? 2 weeks in Europe. Vienna, Paris, London." She spoke with such enthusiasm, making plans for their future together, that Ty felt something inside him break. How could he do this to her? How could he look into those trusting eyes, knowing he'd sent a text to her mother an hour earlier? "That sounds amazing," he squeezed out. "Yeah, I'm really happy for you, for us." Octavia kissed him, jumped out of bed and headed for the bathroom. "Gotta get ready. Mom's making her signature berry pie for dinner. I don't want to be late." As she disappeared behind the bathroom door, Ty covered his face with his hands. The situation was becoming unbearable. He must make a choice, and make it today. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone was gathered in the dining room of the Ellington mansion. The atmosphere was tense, although everyone was trying to maintain a semblance of normality. Torrance was impeccably polite, but avoided looking at his wife. Veronica was nervously adjusting the flowers in the center of the table, and her hands were visibly trembling. Octavia, who didn't notice the tension between her parents, was talking passionately about her upcoming trip to Vienna. "Can you imagine my performance will be at the Musikverein, in the very hall where the great masters played?" "That's wonderful news, dear." Veronica tried to smile, but her eyes were red from sleeplessness. "We are so proud of you." Ty sat silently next to Octavia, feeling Torrance's cold, scrutinizing gaze on him. Did he really know? Or did he just suspect his wife had been unfaithful, but had no idea with whom? "Ty is coming with me too," Octavia continued, squeezing his hand. "It will be our first big trip together. I'm sure you'll have a great time." Torrance sipped his wine. Youth, love, European capitals. What could be better? There was a subtle irony in his voice, but Octavia, absorbed in her dreams, didn't notice it. "I'll get dessert." Veronica stood up from the table, avoiding looking at Ty. "I'll help you," Octavia volunteered, following her mother into the kitchen. Left alone, Torrance and Ty looked at each other across the table in silence. "How long have you known my wife?" Torrance finally asked, keeping his eyes on the young man. Ty felt an icy hand clutching his heart. "Ever since he started dating Octavia, about 6 months." "And how would you characterize your relationship with her?" "With Octavia?" Ty began to think frantically, trying to figure out where this conversation was going. "No," Torrance leaned forward. "With my wife. In the kitchen, Octavia was helping her mother arrange the pie on plates." "Mom, are you okay? You look tired." Veronica smiled weakly. "I just didn't get much sleep. This weekend had been busy." "Did you and Dad have a fight? He's been kind of weird today, too." "It's okay, honey. It's just a simple marital disagreement." Octavia nodded and accidentally touched her mother's purse on the kitchen table. It fell, and a small, gift-wrapped package fell out. "Oh, I'm sorry." Octavia picked it up. "What is it? A present for Daddy?" Veronica turned pale. "No, it's... Put it back, please." But Octavia's curiosity was already piqued. "For whom, then?" She twirled the package in her hands. On the attached card, she saw a name. Tayu. "Tayu?" Octavia asked in surprise. "You bought a gift for Ty?" "It's just a souvenir from Portland," Veronica said quickly, trying to take the package. "It's nothing special." But there was a look of suspicion in her daughter's eyes. She took a step back, tore open the package, and found an antique silver locket inside. Is this grandmother's locket?" Octavia whispered in shock. "The one that great-grandfather brought back from Europe? You want to give the family heirloom to Ty?" Veronica froze, unable to say a word. There was a growing realization in her daughter's eyes. "Why would you give my boyfriend such a valuable gift?" Octavia's voice trembled. And why would you say you brought it from Portland if it had always been in your jewelry box? In the dining room, the tension between the men peaked. I don't know what you mean. Ty tried to speak calmly, but his pallor was showing. I think you do. Torrance twirled his glass in his hands. You know what the advantage of being a surgeon is? You learn to notice details, microscopic changes that others miss. And I noticed the way you look at my wife, the way she looks at you, those fleeting touches you think are imperceptible. Ty remained silent, feeling the ground go from under his feet. I respect you, Ty, Torrance continued. You're smart, educated, ambitious. But now I'm asking you straight out. Are you having an affair with my wife? At that moment, there was the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen, followed by Octavia's scream. You slept with him? My boyfriend? Ty and Torrance jumped up and rushed into the kitchen. Octavia stood clutching the locket in her hand, her face contorted with rage and pain. Veronica, pale as chalk, leaned against the table. What's going on here? Torrance asked demandingly. Ask her! Octavia shouted, pointing at her mother. Ask her why she's giving my boyfriend family heirlooms. Ask her why she's lying about her weekend in Portland. Veronica covered her face with her hands. Honey, please, I can explain everything. Don't you dare call me sweetheart. Octavia turned to Ty. You, both of you. How could you? Ty took a step toward her. Octavia, listen. Stay away from me. She jerked back, and in that moment she saw the look on her father's face, a mixture of shock, pain, and sudden realization. Oh my God, Torrance whispered, shifting his gaze from his wife to Ty and back again. So that's who he is, our daughter's boyfriend. Dead silence hung in the room. Each of the four men froze, realizing the enormity of the situation. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, Veronica whispered at last. It just happened. We tried to stop, but you couldn't contain your lust? Torrance finished for her with icy contempt. Not even for the sake of your own daughter? Octavia looked at her mother with such disgust that Veronica physically recoiled. You said you loved me, Octavia said, turning to Ty. Every time I told you about our future, our plans for Vienna. All this time you've been sleeping with my mother? Ty looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Octavia, I really love you. What happened between me and Veronica? Shut up! She shouted. Don't say her name! Don't you dare talk about love after all this! She threw the locket at Ty, and it hit his chest, falling to the floor with a thud. You're both disgusting. Octavia turned to her mother. You, my own mother. How could you? Baby. Veronica held out her hands to her, but Octavia pulled back. Don't touch me. I'm not your baby anymore. You've ruined everything. Torrance, who until that moment had maintained an icy calm, suddenly grabbed Ty by the collar of his shirt and pressed him against the wall. You came into my house! His voice shook with rage. Sitting at my desk, looking me in the eye, pretending to love my daughter, and all this time. Torrance, let him go! Veronica shrieked, trying to pull her husband away. And you! He turned to his wife, letting go of Ty. 25 years! I gave you everything. A home, a position, love. And you betrayed me with this boy. It's not that simple. Veronica shook her head. Our marriage is long dead, Torrance. We both know that. We were just pretending. And that justifies breaking your daughter's heart? He asked coldly. Octavia, unable to bear the scene any longer, ran out of the kitchen. Octavia, wait! Ty rushed after her. Veronica was alone with her husband. She saw such pain and disappointment in his eyes that she couldn't bear to look at him. You destroyed us, Torrance said quietly. All of us. Octavia ran out into the garden, but Ty caught up with her at the fountain. Please listen to me. He grabbed her arm. Let go. She broke free. I have nothing to say to you, and you have nothing to say to me. It is not what you think, he said desperately. Octavia laughed bitterly. Really? You mean you didn't sleep with my mother? Didn't lie to me every day? Didn't betray me with the person closest to me? I'm confused. Ty ran his hand through his hair. I love you, I really do. But what happened with Veronica? It was like an obsession. We didn't plan it, we didn't mean to hurt. Shut up. She put her hands over her ears. I don't want to know the details of your debauchery. You both disgust me. She turned to leave, but Ty grabbed her arm again. Octavia, please, Just give me a chance to make things right. Fix it? She looked at him with such contempt that he stepped back. Do you really think you can undo what you've done? My father, who loved my mother for a quarter of a century, is now broken. I, who trusted you both, am destroyed. And you want to fix that? I love you, Ty whispered. No, Octavia shook her head. You don't know what love is. Love is not betrayal, not lying, not cheating. Love is loyalty and honesty. And you're just a pathetic liar who couldn't keep his pants zipped. She pushed him away and ran back toward the house. Ty was left standing by the fountain, feeling his world crumble. In Torrance's office, an equally dramatic scene unfolded. Veronica followed her husband, trying to explain herself. You have to understand, Torrance. There's been no real feelings between us for a long time. We've been living as neighbors, not as husband and wife. For years, Torrance stood at the window, looking out at the garden where Ty and Octavia were working things out. And that justifies you having an affair with our daughter's boyfriend? His voice sounded frighteningly calm. Of all the men in Seattle, you chose him? Veronica slumped in her chair, suddenly feeling the weight of her actions. I didn't choose Torrance, it just happened. We met at the gallery long before I knew he was dating Octavia, and then it was too late. Too late, he repeated in a lifeless voice. Too late to stop. Too late to think about the consequences. Too late to remember that you have a daughter who loves this man. He turned to her, and for the first time Veronica saw in his eyes not cold rage, but deep, unbearable pain. I deserve your hatred, she whispered. But believe me, I never meant to hurt Octavia. Did you want to hurt me? He asked quietly. Did you want to hurt me? Veronica shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I thought you didn't care. That our marriage had long existed only on paper. That you were immersed in your work and didn't notice me. Torrance walked slowly to the desk and opened the top drawer. He took out a small velvet box. I was going to give you this for our anniversary next month. He opened the box and Veronica saw an exquisite diamond necklace. I wanted to take you to Paris, like you've always dreamed of. Booked a room at that hotel overlooking the Eiffel Tower. Veronica covered her mouth with her hand, unable to hold back a sob. Did you really think I didn't notice you? Torrance continued. That I couldn't see you withering beside me? I just didn't know how to fix it. I immersed myself in my work so I wouldn't feel helpless. He slammed the box shut and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the carpet. Torrance! Veronica stood up and took a step toward him. If I had known... What? You wouldn't have cheated on me? Or would you have just chosen another man, not our daughter's boyfriend? At that moment, the study door swung open, and Octavia flew into the room. Her face was contorted with anger and pain. You have ruined everything, she screamed, looking at her mother. All my life, all my dreams! Octavia, baby! Veronica stepped toward her daughter, but she recoiled. Don't you dare call me that! You're not my mother anymore! You're just... Suddenly, Ty appeared in the doorway. He looked completely devastated. Octavia, let me explain, he began. This was the last straw for Torrance. With unexpected speed for his age, he rushed at the young man and grabbed him by the throat. Torrance, no! Veronica screamed, trying to pull her husband away. Octavia retreated to the table, accidentally hitting the statue of Themis, a gift to Torrance from a grateful client. The heavy metal figure fell, and in the girl's hand was a broken-off piece, a sharp symbolic sword of the goddess of justice. Ty and Torrance struggled at the door, Veronica trying to separate them. No one noticed Octavia's eyes clouded over, as if her mind had left her for a moment. You have all betrayed me, she whispered, clutching the makeshift weapon in her hand. Everyone I loved. The room was in chaos. Screams, the sound of fighting, the clinking of broken glass. And then there was a piercing scream and a sudden deafening silence. Ty stood frozen, staring at the scarlet stain blurring on his white shirt. An incredulous, surprised smile appeared on his face. He tried to say something, but only a gurgling sound came out of his throat. Lowering his eyes, he saw the hilt of a sword sticking out of his chest. The last thing he saw before he fell was Octavia's face, contorted with horror, disbelief, and a strange, frightening determination. Ty's body collapsed onto Torrance's Persian carpet. For a few moments, no one could move. The three figures froze around the prostrate body, unable to believe their eyes. Veronica was the first to wake up. She fell to her knees beside Ty, trying to feel for a pulse. But the young man's eyes were already glazed over, staring at the ceiling with an unseeing gaze. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, holding his bloody head to her chest. "Not again." Torrance slowly approached his daughter, who stood with her hands to her mouth. "Octavia," he said quietly. "Give me the knife." But it was as if the girl had not heard. She looked at her blood-stained hands and repeated, "He deserved it. They both deserved it." With a cry of despair, Veronica rushed to her daughter. "What have you done? You killed him! You killed him!" Octavia recoiled, her eyes clearing as she realized for the first time what had happened. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. I was so angry. He betrayed me. You all did." Veronica sobbed over Ty's body. Octavia slid down the wall to the floor, and Torrance stood between them, pale and shocked, not knowing whether to save his wife or his daughter. Outside the study window, the sun was setting, coloring the room blood red. The day that began at the family table was ending with a tragedy that would change the lives of the Ellington family forever. In the corner of the office, the red light on the security camera, the same one Torrance had installed a few weeks ago, suspecting something amiss in his wife's behavior, was blinking. No one in the room noticed the light, nor did they notice that in the midst of the struggle, a heavy paperweight had knocked the camera off its mount, turning the lens toward the wall. The last thing the footage captured was the beginning of the confrontation, the shouting and the fall of the camera itself. Exactly who delivered the fatal blow remained outside the lens, a glitch that made a full-blown murder investigation inevitable. Detective Astrid Valdez walked carefully around the office, careful not to disturb the crime scene. Ty's body had already been taken away, but the dark stain on the Persian rug remained a mute witness to the tragedy. The forensics team was collecting evidence, photographing every detail. Astrid noticed the broken Themis statue, the overturned chairs, and the pothole in the wall next to the door. "Looks like a desperate struggle," she muttered, making notes in her notebook. Her attention was drawn to the security camera, knocked out of its place and pointed toward the wall. "When did you install this system, Dr. Ellington?" she asked Torrance, who was sitting in a chair, idly watching the police work. 3 weeks ago." His voice sounded lifeless. "I suspected... Never mind. Did you still have the tape?" "Partially. The camera was knocked down at the beginning of the incident." Astrid nodded, picking up a velvet box from the floor. Inside was an expensive necklace. "Is it yours?" she asked Torrance. He looked at the jewelry with a blank stare. "A gift for Veronica, for our anniversary." In the next room, Veronica sat wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were red with tears, her hands shaking so hard she couldn't hold the cup of water. "Tell me what happened, Mrs. Ellington," Astrid asked softly, sitting down across from her. Veronica swallowed. "Octavia found out about Ty and me, about our affair. How long have you two been in a relationship?" 3 months. We tried to resist the feeling, but..." Astrid listened to Veronica's confession, noting the contradictions and understatements. The woman described a passionate but tormented relationship, a constant struggle between conscience and desire. "Who was holding the knife when Ty was killed?" the detective finally asked. Veronica looked at her with a pained look. "I didn't see. It all happened so fast." "Torrance and Ty struggled. I tried to pull them apart. Octavia screamed. Then there was a blow and Ty fell." "Do you think your husband could have..." "No," Veronica exclaimed. I don't know." Torrance was furious, but he's a doctor. He saves lives, he doesn't take them away. "And Octavia?" Veronica covered her face with her hands. She's incapable of... It's all my fault. If it weren't for my selfishness, Ty would still be alive." Octavia sat in the interrogation room like a statue, pale, motionless, empty-eyed. She answered questions in short sentences, often stopping in mid-sentence. "I found the locket," she said. "Grandmother's locket, the one my mother wanted to give him, and everything became clear. Their looks, their secrets. They betrayed me, both of them. What happened in the study?" Astrid persisted. Screaming, a struggle. I remember the statue falling, a sword in my hand, then blood, a lot of blood. Did you hit Ty? Octavia looked through the detective as if she didn't hear the question. He was supposed to come with me to Vienna. I bought him a ring, and all this time, with my mother. Astrid made a note in her notebook. The shock was getting in the way of a clear statement. Or was that a role well played? Torrance was next. Focused, despite the tragedy, he gave a clear statement. When I realized my wife was having an affair with our daughter's boyfriend, I lost control. I admit it. I grabbed him, we struggled. Veronica tried to pull us apart. Octavia was hysterical. Who delivered the fatal blow? Torrance paused, looking out the window. I didn't see. We were all on the move. When I realized what had happened, Ty was already falling with the blade in his chest. Can you guess? No, he answered firmly. I will not engage in that speculation, detective. Do as you see fit by the law. There was a strange determination in his voice that intrigued Astrid. At home, late that night, Astrid spread out the case file in front of her. Partial camera footage showed the beginning of the confrontation, but cut off at the most critical moment. The medical examiner's office determined that the blow had been delivered with considerable force, but at a certain angle, which could indicate either a tall man or a woman of average height. Torrance had a motive, the rage of a cheating husband. But he was a doctor, a man who dedicated his life to saving others. Veronica, could she have killed her lover in a fit of desperation, realizing that their relationship had destroyed everything? Octavia, betrayed by those closest to her, with a broken heart and a gun in her hand. Astrid leafed through the diary found in Ty's apartment. The last entry, made on the morning of the fateful day. Today must put an end to this. I can't lie to Octavia anymore. She's too pure and sincere, and I can't give up Veronica. She's like a drug to me. We're doomed, all three of us. Whatever decision I make, someone will be destroyed. Underscore Ty's phone contained dozens of messages from Veronica, passionate, desperate, full of remorse. Astrid checked all the timestamps, compared the readings. Something wasn't adding up in this puzzle of broken mirrors, where everyone saw only a reflection of their own pain. The next day, Astrid returned to the Ellington house. In the study, she once again scrutinized every detail, reconstructing the sequence of events. The arrangement of the furniture, the trajectory of the body's fall, the blood spatter on the wall. Everything indicated that Ty had been facing the door at the moment of impact, with his back turned to the table where the statuette stood. Astrid looked up at the mirror opposite, the only one left intact amidst the chaos. It reflected the entire office, and what the camera couldn't capture. That's when Veronica appeared in the doorway. "Detective? Did you find something?" Astrid turned to her slowly. "You know, Mrs. Ellington, I've been thinking a lot about motive. You all had a reason for wanting Ty dead. But there's one thing that's been bugging me." Veronica clenched her hands nervously. "What's that?" "The position of the body and the angle of impact. The knife entered from the bottom up, at an angle that would have been impossible if the blow had come from someone taller like your husband or daughter." Veronica's face turned pale. "What are you saying?" "At the moment when everyone was distracted by the fight, you picked up the sword that had fallen out of the statuette and stabbed Ty in the back. He turned to you, staring in disbelief at the betrayal of the person closest to him, and fell." "No!" exclaimed Veronica, backing away. "I loved him. That's why you did it. From the entries in his diary, it's clear. He was going to end it all, to choose Octavia or no one. And you couldn't let that happen." Veronica collapsed in her chair, her mask broken. "I didn't mean to. I just saw him looking at Octavia, begging for forgiveness. I knew he'd choose her, that I would be alone again, without him, without a husband, without a daughter who would never forgive me." Astrid listened silently to the confession of a woman who'd destroyed her own family because of a passion that had turned into an obsession. "Torrance knows," Veronica whispered at last. "He's seen everything in the reflection. That's why he's protecting me, not for me, for Octavia. So she won't know that her mother not only betrayed her, but killed the man she loved." Outside the window, the rain was beginning to fall, washing away the traces of tragedy. But nothing could wash the blood from Veronica's hands and the pain from the souls of those left to live with the consequences of her choices. In the hallway of the house, Torrance embraced a sobbing Octavia, protecting the now only person dear to him from the horrible truth. 3 lives bound by blood and betrayal, shattered by a passion that was stronger than reason and more powerful than love. Astrid took one last look around the room, where broken mirrors reflected the shards of what had once been family. In each, a fragment of truth was visible, but the full picture was too painful to bear in its entirety. Ahead was the formal charges, the trial, the newspaper headlines. But the real punishment for Veronica had already begun. She had lost everything: her lover, her husband, her daughter, and ultimately herself in a labyrinth of lies and betrayal built with her own hands.